It's about living consciously, knowing that you are an infinite, eternal, energetic being who is currently in a finite, physical, concrete reality. And you are both and. You are both eternal and infinite and energetic. And for the time being, anyway, you are also human and mortal and in a physical experience. So, what I Hey friends, it's Amar. How are you? I hope you're doing well. I have another video for you today, and what I'm going to talk about today is what my guides are referring to as the Ascension Column. This is something that I think most of us would just refer to the center, like being in the center, being centered, being grounded. It's something that, I often refer to, and a concept that I use in my work is like being in the center of yourself, the center of your being. And one of the tools that I use a lot, not only in my vocational practice with my clients and in workshops and groups, but also in my personal practice, is this idea of the inner temple. And the inner temple is at the center of the being. And the inner temple is that place of connection. It is that place of authority. It is that place where all of the things that we need come and go, and we have access to all of the layers of self, not only our human self, but the higher self and above, but also our helpers, our guides, our angels. It's where I connect with spirit, God, source, the universe, whatever it is you call that divine force. And so the idea of the center is something that's been a big part of my practice for pretty much the whole time that I've been on this path consciously. And the idea of being centered and grounded is obviously one that you're going to hear referred to in many traditions. And many people are talking about the idea of being centered and being in your center. There's a lot of things that I think being in the center or the concept of being centered have to do with this idea of ascension and the process of ascension. And interestingly, my guides recently, over the past couple of years, or past couple of years, past couple of weeks, the past couple of weeks, they've been talking about this idea of the center really being the ascension column and being in the center of self, really being a huge part of being an active co-creator and collaborator in your ascension journey. And there are some things that I'm going to share with you today that hopefully will give you a larger concept or a broader understanding of the center, how it can be used, how we can use this idea of being centered as a tool to accelerate our ascension journey, and the different ways that it can be looked at, the different ways it can be used, and why it seems to be so crucial and so important to our experience. So when you hear me talking about the ascension column or the center, I'm essentially talking about the same thing. I think why my guides are referring to it as the Ascension Column now is in an effort to support us in our sovereign journey, in our conscious, collaborative, co-creative journey with spirit, with higher self, with our guides, with all of creation, as we move into this ascension and this new earth timeline in real, actual creation. The idea of being in the center and the idea of the Ascension Column empowers us to know that, okay, ascension isn't something I have to wait for. Ascension isn't something that is given to me or that I have to sit and wait for it to happen to me. Ascension is a process and a journey, and something that we can actively co-create and collaborate in with spirit, with our higher aspects, to accelerate the process and make it one that is more conscious and deliberate. Because from my perspective, as far as I'm concerned, that's what ascension is all about. It's about living consciously, knowing that you are an infinite, eternal, energetic being who is currently in a finite, physical, concrete reality, and you are both and. You are both eternal and infinite and energetic, and for the time being anyway, you are also human and mortal and in a physical experience. So what I have for you today is just some slides, a presentation that I put for you to put together for you to illustrate what it is that I'm talking about and the different ways that we can look at the idea of being centered or the Ascension Column. So again, like I said, the center is something that I refer to quite a bit in my work. It's something that in my personal practice, my own inner work, that really is central, no pun intended, to my perspective, to the way I view the world, and to the way I navigate my way through life. The center is, from my perspective, the center is what connects you to your source. And when we're not in our center, that's when things start to get a little bit wobbly, a little bit wonky, and they essentially begin to fall apart. We could say that being centered is the same as being grounded, being rooted, being balanced, being in the moment. It's where your power is. And like I said in the introduction, my guides have been referring to the center. Every time I'm talking about the center or doing my own inner work of being in that center, they keep referring to it as the Ascension Column. And ascension, first and foremost, I think, like any other spiritual experience, is a process. It's a journey. And like all spiritual journeys, it begins within. Ascension is not a singular experience where you snap your fingers and pop, suddenly you are waking up in a new dimension, in a new reality, in a new world. The definition of ascension is a rising in frequency or rising through levels or layers. So essentially, ascension means simply to rise. And rising is a process of moving through different layers of frequency or energy. Ascension isn't something that happens to you. Ascension is a conscious co-creation with self and spirit. So what I'm sharing with you are some visual representations of the same idea, but I think that's one of the fascinating things about spiritual content and esoteric teachings is it's basically the same seven, divine truths, the same seven universal truths, just told in a million different ways. So what I'm sharing with you today is intended to help spark something within you, to open up perhaps a new perspective, maybe to connect some dots for you so that you can remember how to consciously co-create in your ascension process. And especially for those of you who are visual learners, I think you're going to get a lot out of this. We often hear people talk about finding your center or getting back to your center. To me, this process is multi-layered. You can be mentally distracted, which can take you out of your center. You can be emotionally activated, which certainly can move you from your center. You can be physically overwhelmed to the degree that you start to shut down and leave your center. The center is your place of power. The center is your place of truth and authority. The center feels like home. It's where you access your higher connections and your deeper wisdom. So what is the center? The center is balance. The center is connection. The center is clarity. The center is replenishment. The center is ascension and descension. Now I want to talk about each of these key points and illustrate a little bit more deeply about what I'm talking about. So the center is balance. Let's talk about this idea of balance. The center point of the scales, you can see that image of the scales on the screen there, and the center point of the scales is what allows them to balance. The center point is the fulcrum. If you think of like a seesaw or a teeter-totter, if you're not in the center, you won't find balance. And in order for that seesaw or that teeter-totter to be in balance, there has to be a center point, and the support or that fulcrum needs to be in the dead center of that plank. Balance is reciprocity. It's give and take. It's inflow and it's outflow. We see balance in nature everywhere. Nature shows us all of these truths time and time again if we just know how to see them. The laws of nature are inherently balanced. There's always something that is moving into cohesion or moving into balance. Sometimes it's in a really small micro way, and sometimes it's in a really big macro way, but balance is key. And if we're looking at the scales, I think of the sign of Libra. And interestingly, from an astrological perspective, the sign of Libra is the only one that is represented by a physical object. All of the other astrological signs are represented by an animal or a human or a combination of both, but Libra is given an object to represent it. And interestingly, it is that important. The concept of balance is so important that it shows up as an emblem, as a symbol in the avatar of the scales to remind us of how important balance is. So remember the idea of the fulcrum and the center point, because that's going to be important later on in this presentation. So the center is connection. Connection is about plugging in. Connection is about being present. If you're thinking about, connecting in conversation or connecting with another human being, that can only happen if you are fully engaged in the moment. So it's about being fully in the present moment with whatever is active now, whether that is physical, emotional, energetic, or, just sort of a spiritual vibe in the room. To be fully present in the moment is to be connected. What you see here on the screen is an outline of a human form with a line down the middle. The line that runs down the middle through those seven main energy centers in the human body, this is referred to often as the pranic tube. That's Pranic tube. And this is a channel that runs up and down the midline of the body where the energy moves through the body, kind of like a system of rivers, and branches out to the extremities and to the external parts of the body. They all draw energy from this main central point, and this central channel in many ways is what connects us to the energetic river of life that feeds us. We are a part of life, and life is a part of us. Just like the wave is a part of the ocean, and the ocean is in the wave, the energy that moves through us, that divine spark, that divine force, that chi, that life energy, that is what this center point represents in this image. And to be in that central point and to be grounded and centered is to be connected to that universal flow of life force energy that moves through us. The center is clarity. So let's talk about clarity. I love this image, and this is one of my favorite ones when conceptualizing the idea of being centered. I use it in a lot of different ways, not only in my own practice, but I use it in my one-on-one client sessions and also in my classes and workshops. One way I use this image is to imagine the different layers or to give an image of the different layers of awareness. Your center in the middle there, if you're looking at the bullseye and the target, your center is where you are able to access the inner clarity and understanding. It's a place of stillness. It's a place of silence. It's a place of being connected to your higher self, your guides, God, the universe, and also your body. When you are distracted or triggered or in denial about something, your awareness moves out of the center into these outer rings, and you are no longer connected to your center of truth. Another way to look at this is what I call layers of access. It's another way to consider boundaries that you have set or need to set in your own life. The inner center is where you reside. Again, that bullseye is the center where you are. It's where you are connected to God or whatever the divinity is of your understanding, whatever you call that. So the center is you and spirit. In the center, it is your place of connection. It is your place of power. It is your place of knowing. The first ring outside would be perhaps where the people that you are closest to reside, like your family, your loved ones, your super, super close friends, might be children or spouses. The next ring out is your friends or your acquaintances. Maybe it's even coworkers that you're a little bit closer to. And then the outer rings would be people that come and go in your life, maybe the person that you see at the coffee shop every morning or the attendant at the gym that checks you in. The way that I live my life and the way that I like to use this tool is a way to gauge where is my layer of access, who is in the inner rings and in the inner circles with me. And from my perspective, the way that I personally live my life is nobody lives in the center with me. The center is for me and God. There are times when people come and go and I make them a priority, right? My dad, who I'm currently caring for, he needs me. He's in the center. You know, a partner, a friend, a loved one, someone who needs some support or who I'm engaging with in a really intimate way, they will be in the center with me for a time when they're a priority, but I let them take up space in the center. They do not reside there in the center from day to day normal life. It's only me and spirit in the center. You can also use this as a way to gauge where you are in your life. Sometimes, if you're in an old story or in an old program of feeling unloved or feeling unworthy, you are believing this old program or history of trauma or wounding. You might be on the outside of your life looking in. Right? I think we've all had that experience at some point in our life where we feel like, how did I get out here? I feel like I'm, outside the bakery, pressing my face against the window, trying to get some goodness from inside. And so when you feel like a stranger in your own world, that is usually a sign that somehow you have vacated your center. When you're on the outer rings, you're usually feeling disempowered or dissatisfied or helpless or hopeless, like you've been locked out in the cold trying to find yourself. So this is a good visual way to emotionally return yourself to the center and just go, oh, having an aha moment. That old program, that old story, that old memory that I was triggered into by whatever experience. And suddenly I feel like I'm 12 years old again and awkward and uncomfortable or whatever. So that's always an opportunity for you to stop, take a breath, push the reset button, and come back to center. Now let's talk about replenishment. This image that you see on the screen is a representation of the torus, T-O-R-U-S, or the toroidal field. And this is a geometric model for the infinite flow of energy that comes up through the bottom, moves in through the middle, and then expands back out the top, or it comes in through the top, then condenses and contracts down in through the middle, and then spreads back out through the bottom. Everything from my perspective is geometric. The nature of the universe, of energy, of all of the things that we experience from a physical, energetic, emotional, or metaphysical perspective, it's all geometry. It's all energetic. So this is the primary way that we can begin to see how energy moves through our bodies. This is the same model of a wormhole. This is the same model of, an inflow and an outflow and a flux of energy. And there's another way that we want to be aware. Something else we want to be aware of when we're talking about this is remember that energy of the pranic tube and that image that we saw earlier. This is what that energy looks like as it comes in through the root, up through the central channel, and out through the crown, or down in through the crown, down through that central pranic channel, and then out through the bottom. This is essentially how your batteries get recharged. We have the divine spark within us, but our energy is finite. The energy of this physical body is finite. And so when we're taking our time to find the center, to reconnect to that flow consciously, now I'm drawing energy up from the earth, or I'm drawing it in from the universal mind or the cosmos, and I'm bringing it into the physical body so it can move in through the body or in through the crown or up through the root. And this is that infinite flow of energy that moves through the human body, and how we can begin to conceptualize how we can draw energy into our field. Now, an interesting thing happens when we look at the torus when it's really lit up. This is an image of the torus when the energy is moving in through the top as well as down or up through the bottom at the same time. So you have both fields, both sides of the channel, the crown and the root, moving energy simultaneously. And that's when things get really, really exciting. And interestingly, this is what that looks like from the top. This is a geometric representation of the toroidal flow when it's moving simultaneously in through the top and up through the bottom. And you have these two layers of energy overlapping simultaneously, and you get this really beautifully balanced geometric image. This is really a nod to sacred geometry. And if you really begin to see the perfection that is present in this geometry, that is representational of the perfection of the field of life that we move through and that we are a part of and that we are connected to. So again, it's a reminder that in the center is where it all happens. So the center is ascension and descension. So now I want to talk about one of the most ancient structures on our planet, the pyramids. There's more than one kind of pyramid, but what we're going to talk about for today's purposes is the representation of the square-based pyramid. So it's the pyramid with 4 equilateral triangles on the sides. And these aren't just stone monuments. These are spiritual technology. Freddie Silva, Frddysilva, I believe his website is Invisible Temple or The Invisible Temple. Anyway, look him up. He has some amazing books and some amazing research that he has done on ancient sites and monuments around the planet. I highly recommend his stuff. So this is the 4-sided pyramid that we would see on the Giza Plateau in Egypt. And for the purposes of today's video, what I really want to do is look at this as a 2-dimensional object. So what we have here is the equilateral triangle. 3 lines of equal length and 3 angles of equal measure. We can use this also as a diagram to illustrate the balance of energy in our body. We have our feminine energy and we have our masculine energy. It has nothing to do with energy, or excuse me, has nothing to do with gender. The principles of masculine and feminine energy, again, are everywhere in the natural world, in the universal world, in the metaphysical world, in the invisible world. It's everywhere. It's part of the geometry that balances our experience. Even in our human-made world, we see masculine and feminine. So our feminine energy is our receptive energy. It is our intuition. It is our emotions. It is our internal depths. It holds our shadow. It is the mode for which we receive insight, information, energy, intuition, and wisdom. It's the internal moving force. And the feminine aspect is traditionally seen as the left side of the body. Then we have the masculine side of the body, traditionally signified by the right side of the body. That is our outward facing energy. That is the assertion. That is choosing. That is doing. The feminine self is the elements of earth and water. So we would see that in the tarot as the pentacle and the cup. And the masculine energy is the sword and the wand. So the elements of air and fire. Feminine energy, earth and water, is downward moving naturally. It takes a whole lot of energy to get them to move upwards or to propel them outwards. And so the feminine experience is an internal one. It's one more of collapsing. It's one more of going in. The masculine experience is outward facing. It is expansive. It is the sword that pierces the veil. It is, it is the fertilization of the egg by the sperm. So the masculine self we would see as the right aspect of ourselves. And in order to find the center, we have to find our edges. So in order to find your center when you are dealing with your masculine and feminine aspects and learning how to integrate them, or in the process of integrating them, you have to go all the way to the left, and then you have to go all the way to the right. So if our feminine energy is imbalanced, we usually have problems with receiving. If our masculine energy is imbalanced, we usually have problems with asserting and drawing boundaries. So if there are problems in sharing sharing or being generous or taking action, that's you, or being in our authority, that's usually the masculine energy at play. It almost always shows up in the right side of the body. That's what I would say are where our daddy issues show up. If we have problems with being receptive, with being vulnerable, with being soft, with allowing someone to come into our space, with allowing ourselves to show that deep, dark inner self, that usually has something to do with issues in our feminine aspect, or mommy issues, if you want to think of it that way. So remember when we were talking about the fulcrum and being in the middle and that balance, in order to find our center, we must find our edges. We must have fully explored our darkness and our light, our masculine and our feminine, our giving and our receiving, our allowing and our asserting. So do you see that top angle in the middle, right in the center? Well, guess what? This is the center column where the child descends. If I were to overlay that human body figure on this pyramid again, we would see that human figure sits right in the center of that pyramid, and that central channel is where the child descends. In order to receive the child, we must have our feminine and masculine in balance. The child is the eternal infinite self. It is the pure, uncorruptible soul or higher self. It is what really began last year in 2023 around the Lionsgate portal in August. The descension of this higher self really began to come in. And of course, depending upon where anybody was individually with the balancing of their masculine and feminine energies, that process is still continuing as we come into balance. And again, it's a process. Ascension is not just one and done. And the reason that descension was able to happen is because we had raised our frequency to the degree that now our higher aspects could come and meet us in the middle, so to speak. So the child is the reclamation of that divine, eternal, innocent self. And in order for the child to descend, the masculine and feminine must be in balance. The seesaw can't balance if the fulcrum isn't right in the center. So this is a view of the pyramid from the top. If we were to look at the top of the four-sided pyramid, we would see the X marks the spot. Right in the middle is where that energy impulse moves in and out of the pyramid, just like the body. So I think one of the things we can talk about is how to find the center. Look, I don't have all the answers. What I'm sharing here are things that have worked for me, have worked for my clients: meditation, journaling, exercise, salt baths, conscious conversation with people you can trust and you can be open with, grounding or earthing in a physical sense, inner work, your inner child work, your inner emotional work, your shadow work, your parts work, whatever system, human design, gene keys, internal family systems, whatever system of information works for you. That would be the inner work. The emotional architecture is something that I use in my own practice with my clients, something that I also teach a class on a couple of times, or at least once a year I try to. And really the whole point of this is seeing how finding the center doesn't just happen on one level, right? Meditation is a physical act, but it also affects us emotionally and energetically. Journaling is a physical act, but it can allow us to release things emotionally or understand things intellectually. Exercise is very physical, but what it often can do is give the mind a chance to rest. If the body is the one in charge, and if I'm working out and being mindful and present in my exercise, then the mind gets a second to take a rest and take a breather. Salt baths can be a very spiritual experience, a very energetic experience if you're doing them right. Same thing with conscious conversation, grounding, inner work, and emotional architecture. All of these practices can hit you at all of the different levels and the different ways that you can find that center, whether it's physical, emotional, energetic, or mental. So I don't think there's one answer into finding your center. I think the key is to just begin. Just start with something. Ask your friends if you don't know. Start with something on this list and just be curious about it and explore. I think you would be amazed at what happens when you just start to become curious about your inner experience, about your internal landscape, and begin to build what I call the inner temple. All it takes is intention and willingness. That's it. There are only two things required for a successful spiritual life: your willingness and your presence and your curiosity. I guess that's three things. But that's all you really need to do to investigate and explore your inner world and begin to recreate the external world in time. So I think one of the most important things to know about being centered, more than anything, it's a feeling thing. You know it when you feel it. Like I always say, only you know what truth feels like. And the center is where you find your truth. The center feels like home. The center feels safe. The center feels comfortable. The center feels like you're returning to something. So ultimately, it's a feeling thing. If you're trying something, if you're engaging in a practice, or you're engaging in something that is designed to help you find your center and you don't really feel it, trust that feeling. Now, it might take a little bit of time in the beginning. Don't expect instantaneous results. However old you are today is how long it took you to get to this point where perhaps you are not centered. And so to find your center might also take a little bit of time, but with focus and dedication and open heart and curiosity and willingness, most important, willingness to change, to grow, and to shift your experience, anything is possible. I hope this helps you find your center. I hope this helps illuminate a little bit what I'm talking about when I'm saying the center, or this idea of the ascension column. And I would say that how this relates to the path of ascension and the timeline of physical ascension is this is the way that you can actively co-create and accelerate your ascension process with spirit, with self, with God, the universe, angels, guides, whatever it is that you believe in, whatever it is that you connect with on that metaphysical level. It's understanding that this is a co-creative process. You are not being dictated to. Ascension doesn't just happen. It's something you have to show up for. It's something you have to be willing to do and present for. We live in a free will reality, and that means we have to be willing and show up. So take a breath, take a beat, find your center, and exhale. I love you. Mwah. Thanks for watching.